Today I'm out in Monticello, New York with the new 2022 Toyota 86. This is the entry-level sports car in Toyota's lineup, and this can be best thought of as baby's first track car. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what's new, what's not new, what's hot, what's not, and why you might or might not want to get a new 86. The first thing to know about the new 86 is that this is not entirely new. The basis of this vehicle first started in 2007 as the Scion FRS. It then later became the Toyota 86 when Scion was canceled in the United States, and the close sister ship to this is the Subaru BRZ. Now, the fact that this is more of a complete refresh rather than a complete redesign is absolutely not a problem, because it's helped keep the price tag of the 86 low. This is going to start under $30,000. Final pricing is not available just yet, and the under $30,000 price tag will include the pesky destination charge. If you're looking for a vehicle for your daily commute that can seat four, but still have an awful lot of fun on the track on weekends, that's exactly what the 86 is about. The biggest change for 2022 is the front end design, which is definitely squarer, leaner, and meaner. We have full LED headlights and LED turn signals up front. Also functional vents down below. These help relieve pressure up front and help direct air around the wheel well, and also help improve brake cooling. At 167.9 inches, this is about 1 inch longer than the outgoing model, about 5 inches shorter than the Toyota Supra, but an important 21 inches shorter than a Ford Mustang. And in my mind, a Mustang is a reasonable cross-shop against something like the Toyota GR86, because both of them are fun vehicles that are practical for daily commuting and also suitable for daily track driving, if that's something that you're interested in as well. But the character of this is quite different than something like a Mustang or a Camaro. It's considerably smaller, it's lighter, it has narrower tires, which is an interesting asset to this vehicle. You can get either 17 or 18-inch wheels, and 215 width tires are standard. Some folks have given Toyota a bit of a hard time for the tire size and the tire choice on the Toyota 86, but they truly fit the nature of the vehicle. They're less expensive than wider tires, and wider wheels would be. Clearly, a 215/40 R18 is going to be an awful lot cheaper to replace than a wide 305 width tire that you'd find on an ultra-high performance vehicle. So for about $30,000 and a weekend budget, you could have this be your daily driver and your track-focused vehicle by just simply keeping a set of summer tires in the back. Now, there's also a reason that we find those primacy tires in the lower-end models. Those tires simply give up grip a little bit sooner. And that's actually an asset for the GR86, because if you plan on learning rear-wheel drive dynamics, if this is going to be your first rear-wheel drive car and you want to learn how they behave out on a track, especially a smaller track event, then giving up grip early actually helps you figure out how the vehicle drives. It helps you learn those rear-wheel drive dynamics a little bit easier and a little bit more safely than simply tackling a Supra from the start. The rear end design has also become much sharper for 2022. We have simpler tail lamps that I think are much more attractive, dual exhaust down there at the bottom, and full LED taillights in all models. All GR86 models have a trunk lid that forms a bit of a spoiler on the rear, but if you get the premium pack, then you get this added on spoiler, which really makes things much more dramatic. The biggest change for 2022 happens under the hood, where we find a new 2.4-liter boxer engine. I'll apologize at this point if I've accidentally called this an FRS or a BRZ at any point in this video, because it's bound to happen at some point later. This engine, like the rest of the car, is a collaboration between Toyota and Subaru. The increase in displacement comes largely from an increased bore diameter on this engine that bumps up power to 228 horsepower and torque to 184 pound-feet. But the biggest thing to know about the torque is that the peak torque happens at 3,000 RPM less than the outgoing engine. So this is significantly torqueier, and you will definitely notice that out on the track and out on the road. 0 to 60 time is significantly improved. Manual transmission to manual transmission, it's nearly a full second faster 0 to 60. According to Toyota, this will go 6.1 seconds 0 to 60 with the manual, 6.6 seconds with a 6-speed automatic. The automatic transmission 0 to 60 time is a big improvement, because the previous generation model took about 8 seconds to do that. In many ways, the closest competitor for the Toyota 86 is the Mazda MX-5, but this engine produces notably more power than you'll find in that Mazda, about 40 horsepower more. But the fuel economy, that is a little bit below where some might expect it to be. The 6-speed manual transmission will get you 21 miles per gallon, the 6-speed automatic 24 miles per gallon. And that seems to be because the gearing ratios in this vehicle are definitely designed for lower speed performance, track performance, and especially really small tracks like an SCCA track near you. When it comes to active safety systems, the GR86 doesn't quite align with the rest of the Toyota lineup, and that's largely because this was co-developed with Subaru, and they decided to use the Subaru EyeSight system for the basis of the active safety technologies. That gives you adaptive cruise control, lane centering, etc. You'll only find that on the automatic transmission versions. If you get the manual transmission model, you can't get adaptive cruise control, which is a little bit unusual in the Toyota lineup, because vehicles like the Toyota Corolla can have adaptive cruise control with the manual transmission. My psychic powers tell me that the comment section is going to be full of comments complaining about the Toyota-Subaru alliance, and of course, the Toyota-BMW alliance that launched the Supra as well. Why don't I find that to be a problem? Well, quite simply, if it wasn't for alliances like these two, we wouldn't have the GR86, and we wouldn't have the Supra, and we absolutely positively would not have them both. Designing a new sports car like the 86 is pretty expensive, especially when you're trying to make a track-focused vehicle that's affordable like this. We have that low boxer engine in there, which really lowers the center of gravity. Toyota didn't have any boxer engine designs. They had to borrow one from someone or design one all for themselves, and that wouldn't have made sense in a low-volume vehicle like the GR86. So quite simply, without Toyota's money, Subaru wouldn't have one, and without Subaru, Toyota wouldn't have one either. So this is a match made in heaven as far as I'm concerned. And the same thing goes with the Supra. The Z4 wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Toyota's money, and the Supra wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the BMW parts bin. So what's the difference between the GR86 and the BRZ, and why might you want to get one or the other? Obviously, a large part of it has to come down to styling and dealer experience. Do you want the Subaru logo on it? Do you want the Toyota logo on it? Do you like the styling of one or the other? Because the vast majority of the vehicle is shared. But there are also some differences when it comes to tuning. So the way they feel out on the road and out on the track is a little bit different. If you want to know more about that, you're going to have to wait until I can get my hands on the also redesigned GR86. I mean BRZ. I mean whatever that is. The one from Subaru, that's coming in 2 weeks. Front seat comfort's good. The driver gets a 6-way manual adjustable seat. The passenger has a 4-way adjustable seat, and we have a tilt telescopic manual steering column. Now, one thing you should keep in mind is that if you are a taller person and you want to do some weekend track driving, this is going to be more comfortable than a Mazda MX-5 because we have more headroom. I have about 1.5 inches of headroom in this model. But it does mean that when I have a helmet on, I do have to kind of scrunch myself down a little bit in order to fit here, and I'm only 6 feet tall. If you're taller than I am, this is definitely going to be a bit of an issue. You're going to have to either opt for the very reclined track driving position, scrunch down even more, or buy another car. One of the things that makes the GR86 more practical than an MX-5 is the fact that we have a back seat, although this is a 2-passenger back seat, not a 3-person back seat. So if you do need to try and strap a child seat back here, this is the kind of vehicle where you could do that if you needed to. There's not a lot of headroom back here for adults. I would have to crane my head to one side in order to sit right there, but I could actually put a reasonably sized adult up front, have them be moderately comfortable and still fit back here. I wouldn't be comfortable in the back seat, but I could certainly do it if I needed to. And that's an awful lot more practical than a car that simply doesn't have back seats at all. I would have loved to have seen a 50-50 split rear seat back, but these seats do fold together, and they fold completely flat with the cargo area in the rear. That makes this also much more cargo practical than the MX-5, and it does mean that if you have weekend tires for your track day event, wherever that may be, you can put them right here, and you don't have to worry about a flat tire out on the track, or swapping tires on the track, putting the vehicle on a trailer, all that added expense. If you really want to do weekend track duty, this is going to be a great option for you. And it's also going to be practical for the Home Depot run. Behind the trunk lid, we find just over 6 cubic feet of storage space. That is a hair less than we found in the outgoing model, largely due to the styling changes of the vehicle. But we still have hidden hinges over here, which don't impact the cargo capacity at all. So if you can fit it in there, the lid will still close. Under the load floor, we find a bit of additional storage space and an area where you could put a spare tire if you wanted to do that aftermarket. Now let's take a quick look around the interior. We have the dual camera active safety setup in this model because this interior is the automatic transmission model. You'll find those right up here by the map lights, etc. Over here we have a notice from Toyota that says that this is a pre-production vehicle and not everything in here may be quite right. So there may be a few things that are a little bit off as far as fit and finish goes, but they'll be right in the production version. You can hardly see it here on camera, but we do have a relatively bowl-shaped roof that really helps improve access for people that are wearing a helmet here. We have fixed height shoulder belts for the driver and front passenger, 2-way adjustable headrests, and a few different upholstery options. Since this model is the top-end premium trim, the interior is done in Alcantara and leather on the sides. We have more soft-touch materials on this inside than we had in the last generation. The front doors have large practical bottle holders well integrated into them, a lot of soft touch materials going on here, and definitely a more modern design than we found in the last 86. On the dashboard we find some soft and some hard touch components. We have a soft touch upper section, hard plastics lower on the dashboard, and then a pretty decently sized bin style glove compartment. I had no problem fitting an 11-inch iPad in there. We have round air vents on each side of the dash, and in the middle some horizontal air vents. You'll notice that the infotainment software looks pretty familiar if you've seen any modern Subaru vehicles. That's because this was basically borrowed out of the Subaru lineup. The software is snappy and easy to use. It also supports smartphone integration like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. We have the engine start-stop button right below that. Single zone automatic climate control, auto button right over there, some controls for that climate control system right there, a gated shifter, so drive is all the way down there, manual mode is over to the left side. We then have some buttons for the drivetrain here, sport, snow, track mode, and this also turns off the traction control, or puts it basically to a track mode, I guess you could say. We have toggle switches for the heated front seats, handbrake right there, a single large cup holder here, and then behind this door, 2 large cup holders in the storage area. This is also where we find the USB inputs for the infotainment system. On the driver's side, we find an Alcantara top to the instrument cluster binnacle, and that instrument cluster is a partial LCD design. On the left side, we find a 7-inch LCD that is color, and then on the right side, we have some additional LED gauges. These coordinate together in a vehicle start-stop sequence, so if I go ahead and start it there, you'll notice that that whirls around, and then these little bars on each side are meant to indicate the cylinder motions in a boxer-style engine. The display changes based on the mode that you're in, so that's regular mode. We also have a slight change in sport, and then if I press and hold the track button, you'll notice that we get a horizontal tachometer. The steering wheel is a round 3-spoke design. If you get the automatic transmission, we have paddle shifters on the back, we have down over there on the left, up over on the right. You'll find the controls for that multifunction LCD over here on the right side, along with some of the controls for the adaptive cruise control. We have the stock right down there like we find in some Toyota vehicles, and then a button there for the distance. On this side, we find the controls for the infotainment system. I've spent most of my time today in the automatic transmission equipped Toyota 86 because logically this is the one that most people will be buying. The manual transmission model is more fun, and if you're really debating between the two, I would probably get the manual transmission. It has a really good shifter feel, they've refined it more for 2022, and it has more aggressive gear ratios. It has a pretty deep final drive, and all of the ratios are more aggressive than the 6-speed automatic transmission. And that's the main reason that you can go 0 to 60 faster in that model if you're really quick on the shifter. According to Toyota, 0 to 60 in 6.1 seconds. That's 9/10 of a second faster than the outgoing model. You can largely thank the increase in torque and the massive improvement in the torque curve in this vehicle. The previous engine had a somewhat unusual torque curve. Not only was torque pretty high on the RPM band, you had to go way up over 6,000 RPM to get peak torque, but you also felt like you had to rev the nuts off of it to get anywhere. And this engine is quite different. This one redlines at around 7,500 RPM or so, but it has an awful lot more low-end torque, and this feels more like a sporty naturally aspirated engine, where the torque will fall off gradually at the upper end rather than dropping off of a cliff. And you'll really notice that out on the road and out on the track. This definitely has more mid-range pull, more daily driver livability, and if you get the manual transmission, it's much easier to live with this engine with the manual now, thanks to that added low-end torque. Now, in the automatic transmission version, you're gonna go 0 to 60 in about 6.6 seconds. That is a massive improvement over the outgoing model. According to Toyota, that previous one did it in 8 seconds, so that's a bigger improvement thanks to the added torque that we get out of this, and a refined automatic transmission. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to test the braking distance in this vehicle. You'll have to wait until I can get this at home for that particular score, but it's easy to say that handling is excellent in the 86. But it's not exactly what some people might be expecting. If you're looking for the absolute most in grip, for the same price, you could get probably slightly better grip in something like a Camaro or a Mustang, depending on exactly which options you select. If you get the 2.3-liter turbo in the Mustang and you get some really wide, grippy tires on that, you could end up getting much better grip numbers than you'd get in the GR86. But you wouldn't get the same kind of feel that we get out of this. And that's really the main thing to know about the GR86, is that this vehicle was designed to be more than just a simple handling number or a simple acceleration number. This was designed to be a cohesive vehicle that feels great when you're out on the road with the car. It's the kind of car that feels almost like an extension of the driver. It's the car that wants you to drive it faster, it wants you to drive it harder. And because this doesn't have as much power as a Supra, it's easier to explore the top-end limits of grip and acceleration and braking, and those speeds are going to be lower than in those more expensive vehicles. On the downside, the ride is obviously going to be a little bit firm for the GR86. That's just the nature of this kind of vehicle, but it is an awful lot of fun. While the engine is revving this high, I should tell you that not all the engine noise is real. According to Toyota, there is a little speaker under the dashboard that's helping play an augmented exhaust note, and it will get a bit more aggressive if we put it in sport. And if we put it in track, apparently it gets even more aggressive. The main difference that I noted is there's sort of a low-frequency growl that's added to the soundtrack. Unfortunately, I don't have any cabin noise specifications for you just yet, nor fuel economy numbers, because I haven't really been able to spend that much time out on the regular road with this vehicle. Most of my time has been spent out on the track and some shorter drive loops around home base here. I suspect that for most folks this will stick pretty close to the EPA estimates, but you might be wondering, why is it this 28, 29, 30 miles per gallon combined instead of the 21 miles per gallon that we get in the manual transmission model especially? A lot of that has to do with the gearing. The gearing in the manual transmission is definitely pretty aggressive, and some of it has to do with the engine design in this vehicle. Obviously, performance and the ability to get you where you want to go on a track was a little bit more important than fuel economy, and that's the big thing. Now, of course, it's time to get this out on the kind of road surface that it was designed for, the track. The track is really the natural environment of the GR86, although I have to say that it's not necessarily the track that I'm on here, because this track is somewhat large, and that's why there are portions of this track that Toyota has actually coned off to keep things a little bit more narrow here. Now, obviously, I am not a professional race driver, but I've spent enough time on a track to know what I like in a track vehicle and what I don't like in a track vehicle. And what I love about the GR86 is the steering feel. The steering feel is definitely communicative, it's accurate. This has electric power steering, so logically it's not going to have as much steering feel as some of those classic Supras that you might still be driving, but it's still pretty good for a modern car, and it definitely is right where we see the Mazda MX-5, which is logically a direct competitor to this. I have to say, I do feel a tiny bit cheated that not all the engine noise in this cabin is real, but it's still a really fun vehicle to drive, and I think Toyota has done an excellent job making the augmented engine noise sound as realistic as possible. Now, you'll notice I'm going through some of these little side chicanes there, and that is simply to slow us down because Toyota doesn't want us to drive this absolutely balls out on this track. This is the kind of vehicle that you could really if you wanted to, but for this, they've decided to keep things a little bit tighter. On smaller, tighter tracks, it'll become obvious why Toyota decided to put Michelin Primacy tires on the base version of the Toyota 86. Those tires will break loose before the Michelin summer tires that are on this particular model. And that's actually advantageous if you really want to discover the limits of a rear-wheel drive vehicle, discover its dynamics, etc. If you want to get tail happy in your GR86, it's going to be an awful lot easier with those tires. It's not that the GR86 isn't fun out on a larger track, this certainly is, but larger tracks simply mean that your speeds are going to be higher. Your likelihood of spinning out of control and smacking a wall or a tire are going to be higher than on some of those tighter, narrower tracks where really you're just endangering the cones. This, of course, might just be me, but I tend to prefer those smaller, tighter tracks to larger tracks anyway. The sound and character of this Boxster engine is definitely noticeable out on the track. It has a gruffness, a perhaps raw characteristic that you don't find in inline four-cylinder engines. Some people might not like it, but I actually think it just adds to the character of the 86. Is the GR86 right for you? That depends on exactly what you expect out of your next performance vehicle. If you want the absolute fastest 0 to 60 times in the Toyota lineup, you're going to want the Supra. If you want the added features that you'll find in a more luxury-oriented performance vehicle, that's where the Supra slots in. But if you're looking for affordable fun on the street or on the track, that is exactly GR86 comes in. This is going to be under $30,000 according to Toyota, including the destination charge, but unfortunately they have not said exactly how much it's going to cost just yet. The MSRP on the current 2020 model is just over $27,000. I expect this is going to be a little bit more expensive, but I wouldn't be surprised if it stuck pretty close to $28,000. This is going to be a pretty good deal, but of course there's a lot that you could also get for a similar price range. You could get something like a base Camaro, you could get a Mustang with a 2.3-liter turbo. All of those vehicles are going to be an awful lot of fun to drive, but this is going to be the one that's going to focus the most on precision handling, the directness of the steering, the feel of the entire vehicle, and how it all works together and engages with the driver out on a track. If you want weekend fun with the top off, that's obviously not going to be this either because there is no convertible or roadster version. The GR86 is precisely the definition of affordable fun. If you're the kind of person that can only afford a 2-car household or a 1-car household, this is the kind of vehicle where you can have that weekend fun and still have some modicum of daily driver livability. Obviously, this is not going to be as practical as a Corolla or a Civic or an Accord or anything like that, but this is going to be an awful lot more fun. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below, and of course stay tuned because I will have a full review on this just as soon as I can get my hands on it. And of course, I will be driving the Subaru BRZ literally 2 weeks after I am driving this one. So be sure and stay tuned for that if you haven't already done so. Hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen. Find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautos, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all those other social things. Check out the merch store at AOAmerch.com and of course the website at alexonautos.com. I'll see all of you later.